How to sew the gift pouch. This is part of the Wrapped in Style kit from Amber Makes. Start by cutting out the fabric. From the fabric panel, you need to cut out the gift pouch front outer, back outer and base outer. Place these 3 pieces on top of the lining fabric that you'll need to provide yourself and cut round them so that they're exactly the same size and shape to make all the lining pieces. Making the outer body. Take the gift pouch front outer and you need to leave a casing gap for the drawstring, so this needs to be measured. So on the right hand side, measure 1 3/4 inches down from the top edge and mark. You'll notice that this is 1/2 inch above the printed border section because you can see it through from the wrong side of the fabric. Make the same measurement on the left hand side. Now place the front outer and the back outer right sides facing. Match up all the side edges and pin together. The printed border sections will match up exactly because they've been printed the same width on the front outer and the back outer. So pin them together at either end and then one in the centre, making sure they match up. Now sew together down to the mark, stop stitching and then stitch from the top of the printed border along the bottom and then stitch up the other side, leave the gap and stitch up to the top. Don't stitch across the bottom edge though. You can see I've left the gap unstitched there on the right and the left, and I've left the gap open at the bottom. Now, open up the seams, take one side seam at a time and press it open all the way from the top to the bottom. And repeat this on the other side. This will give you a neater finish and you need the seam to be pressed open so that you've got the casing gap. Now turn the joined outer pieces right sides out and top stitch all the way around the edge of that gap. It holds the seam allowances flat to allow the casing to go through. You can see I've just stitched a small rectangle around the casing gap on one side and on the other side as well. And this completes the body outer. Attaching the base to your bag. Take the bottom of the joined outer pieces and place the seams together so they're right sides facing. Now mark with a pen or pins where the either end of those edges are. This is to mark the quarter points. Now take the gift pouch base outer and fold it in half. Finger crease the corners and then place those 2 marks right sides facing and again finger crease where those edges are. Open it all out and mark those creases, and these are the quarter points of your base. Now with the body outer wrong sides out, place the gift pouch base outer inside. Match up one of the seams of the body outer to one of the quarter marks on the base. Make sure these are right sides facing. Match the opposite quarter point of the base outer to the other seam of the body outer and pin together. Place your pins vertically. You're going to need to do this to be able to get the circle to fit nice and evenly. Now match the other quarter point of the body outer to the other quarter mark of the base outer and then do the same on the other side. By matching and pinning the quarter points together first, it's much easier to get the circle to lie neatly and evenly inside because then you're only having to pin and work on a quarter of the piece at a time. Now you can pin together between these points. It will fit all the way round, but you will just need to ease it as you go. If you find that there's small places where it doesn't fit, then just stretch the fabric very slightly and it will go around the edge of the circle. Now repeat this to pin between the quarter points all the way around so that the base is attached to the body. Then sew together using a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way round. Make sure you've got the body on top when you sew, not the base. It's easier to get it lying evenly when you do that. This completes the body outer. Making the lining. The lining is made in exactly the same way as you make the outer, except you need to leave a 4-inch gap in one of the sides. This will be used for turning. Put the base on in the same way as well. Assembling the bag. Place the lining inside the outer so that they are right sides facing. And match up the top raw edges. To start off with, match the side seams so that the outer side seam and the lining side seam are right sides facing, and arrange the seam allowances so that they're lying flat. This reduces the bulk in the top of the bag and you'll get a neater finish. Once you've pinned them together at one side seam, pin them together at the other side seam. Now pin them together all around the top edge, making sure that those raw edges match all the time and the lining is tucked neatly inside. You don't want to get any of the extra lining caught in the seam, so make sure it's lying nice and flat. Now sew it together all the way around the top edge. Once that's done, pull the lining out from the inside of the bag. Put your hand inside the lining. Grab hold of the bottom of the outer and pull it all the way through so that it's turned right sides out. Fold the edges of the push your hand inside first, just to push out the edges of the seams. It's easier to do this before you sew the turning gap closed. Now fold the edges of the turning gap to the inside by 1/4 inch so that it's all lying nice and flat, and pin together. Now stitch together to close the turning gap. Once that's done, push the lining inside the outer so that the bases lie right on top of each other. Now arrange it so that the seam is lying right on the edge and give it a press. The aim here is that you can't see the lining from the outside. Once it's pressed all the way around, arrange it again to make sure that the lining is laying flat inside. Now take a pin and pin the lining to the outer all the way along, just below below the bottom of the printed border. You're going to be stitching along the bottom edge of this, about 1/2 inch away from it, making sure all the time that the lining is lying nice and flat inside and isn't creased or bunched up at all. Now stitch along the bottom edge of this printed border all the way round through the outer and the lining. Once this is done, that's the bottom edge of your casing. You now need to mark the top edge. So mark 1/2 inch, which is the top of the casing. I've used a rotary ruler here because it's got the measurements already on it, so it's a really easy way to do it. But if you haven't got a rotary cutting ruler, then just use a ruler and a pen. But measure and mark 1/2 inch above here. This is the line that you're going to sew on. So by marking it with an erasable pen first, you can be sure you'll get a really nice, neat line. You can see that the top of this line is level with the top of that little casing gap you left earlier. Now stitch all the way along this line. Now you've got your casing. Put your cord into either a bodkin or a safety pin so that you can thread it all the way through. Now this casing is just 1/2 inch wide, so you'll need to use something narrow. I like to use a nylon cord for this, but you could use a narrow ribbon, baker's twine, or some string or some cord. Go all the way around from one casing to another. Once you get to the casing the other side, just keep going. Don't pull it out of that casing. You need to come in and out at the same point. Once you've got all the way around the edge, pull your cord through. And tie the ends of the cord in a knot. Do this before you add the other length, otherwise it might come undone. Now once that's done, you can see it will pull closed. Take the other length of cord and thread it all the way through from the opposite casing round to the other side in exactly the same way, knotting the ends. Pull the cord to close the bag.